Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. This is the 124th video in our Master Series and the 10th video in our group processing phase. This should be a pretty quick video because we are going to be addressing expansion. So basically the only way to really relate this, I'll go back and say that, always remember 3 steps forward, 1 step back. So, you're going through anything work you do, you go back, evaluate those individual tracks, their buses, and also go back anytime you do any work on any bus as you go through, go back one at a time and then reevaluate any work that you've done, and then reevaluate the work you've done here again, that if you've made any changes along the path going back here, and that's going to really help you make you a better engineer. Next thing is remember that each individual part of the mix can be its own individual mix, whether it's the chorus or the verse. You might have to deal with them separately, so really get used to using your automation tools so that you can give each section the attention that it needs as an individual mix unto itself, and really keep that in mind. And the other thing was to really keep your analysis tools open that you have on your main bus before the main out to help you make better judgments, to see issues you're having, and to see what work that you have done. So when we come to this expansion bus, I keep this here for one reason, because I had told you before that when you get a mix done, that basically you have this new track that's just like when you have a track that you recorded, that it has its own individual needs. Now, whether or not you've done a bunch of work on those individual tracks or their buses or whatever, that it's still a brand new track. So you want to go back and revisit that, and you can go back and watch the videos in first phase processing. We talked about expansion, and you may want to address that. You may find yourself that you want to do some upwards expansion, from this point, from this level up to, the highest point in your mix. You might want to do some upwards expansion from there in certain sections or in certain areas of your mix. Like you might have a chorus and you decide that, and then this chorus from this level to there, that you want to upwards expand that a little bit above the rest of the things that are below that. So you're going to be trying to do some upwards expansion on that. Does that make sense? And that's okay. This is a concept that is, not new to audio engineering, but it's one of those concepts that can really help sometimes. And sometimes you might not fuss with it at all, but sometimes it can be really helpful. You decide that, your vocals are blended with your let's say your vocals are blended with your your harmonies during a chorus, and you decide that they're at certain levels and you've set everything in their own place and you've set the levels and everything, but they could really use a little bump. You want to upwards expand them a little bit to where the harmonies are pretty close in decibel level to the out front vocals, from like this point up, but you want to expand them up a little bit. So they're pushing up a little bit more, sitting up above the rest of the mix a little bit, because now it's a whole new track. Your whole entire mix is now blended all together. It's all mixed, and and you can evaluate this in a couple different ways. The concept of upwards expansion or compression is that it also can have a little bit of a blending effect. You can go back to the individual tracks or buses and kick those up a little bit, if you want to raise them up a little bit. But here, if you do upwards expansion, it has a little bit different effect. And sometimes it's just minute work. It's like, this is sweetening the mix. So it might be just a little bit, you want to kick it up a little bit. The two of those together, that are, basically that there's sounds blended together that are going to get, expanded up just a little bit. You're expanding the dynamic range of the mix a little bit by doing that. And it has a little bit different effect than going back and doing it to those individual tracks. Does that make sense? And plus, you might just be sweetening it a little bit. You might just go, well, I really, now I'm listening to it, I just, right during the chorus, I want to, use some upwards expansion right there between this level and the top level, where the harmonies and chorus are. Or you might want to do it a little bit lower. You might want to mix in a little bit of the guitar in there, or the bass that's right, the backing tracks that are right underneath, and you might want to expand that up just a little bit, right up above the rest of the mix a little bit, maybe just a little teeny bit. So it's an experimentation, but you understand the concept. And same thing with upwards compression. You're going things from this point down that you're trying to squish up a little bit so that the dynamic range between here and here is a little bit less, which is going to it's causing an upwards compression so that you might have some lower end stuff that you want to bring up some. You don't want to compress it up between this level here or this level here or wherever, and the bottom end of your production, then you might want to upwards compress that a little bit. Bring up some of that lower stuff into the mix a little bit rather than going back and dealing with those individual tracks. Because we're just sweetening. This isn't, like major work. We've done all the major work we're doing, but it might need just a little bit of upwards expansion, and you might, from there to there, I'm just going to upward expand that a little bit. Yeah, that sounds much better in there in this chorus. And, during this bridge, or this break or something, a little bit of upwards, compression here, is really helps bring that lower end up a little bit and the lower decibel stuff up a little bit. That's adding a little bit more effect of those tracks from the lower end and the lower decibel range, squishing them up. Does that make sense? And fussing with the dynamic range of the mix that way, can be very delicate work. So it really takes experimentation on your part, but it's a pretty simple concept. Just remember, any work you do here, evaluate it from whether you might do it on those individual tracks or those buses themselves, on the mix levels themselves, and once you get done, you go, you're A-Bing it back and forth, any work you've done, does that sound, how's that sound, walk away, come back, do it again, okay, well, I don't know, and then try it again and bring it back to zero, and then, upwards, expand it a little bit, bring it up, back off a little bit, A-B it back and forth, going through that process, until you're happy with it, and then go back and reevaluate what you did on this bus, this bus, this bus, this bus, this bus, and this bus, back to this bus to see if you need to make any adjustments. And if you made any adjustments anywhere in line, that you may need to readjust what you did that you decided to do here again. So really keep that in mind. But this is normally very finite work, and it basically, like I said, you might want to automate it. You might be doing it differently in different sections of the song, but a lot of times it can be very helpful because it also can blend things together a little bit differently also, to where, you're starting to upwards compress things a little bit. That's having, not only is it's bringing up that lower decibel range things between 2 points, compressing them together a little bit, bringing them up into the mix a little bit more, a little differently than adjusting their levels. This can have a little bit different effect. The same thing with upwards expansion. And upwards expansion can be great sometimes for dealing with what's supposed to be sitting on top of the mix. It's like, I got my vocals and my harmonies during this chorus set fine, but I'm not exactly happy with it, how they're riding above the rest of the mix exactly. And you might be able to pick a point to where they're about at those levels, solo them by themselves, and then unsolo them once you figure out what their levels are about, where about the levels start, and then upwards expand them a little bit to try to make them, raise them up above the mix a little bit. And sometimes you might want to bring this down to bring a little bit of what's behind them up it a little bit also, but not all of it. Does that make sense? And so it's kind of finite work, and it really takes experimentation on your part, because trying to show you how that might happen in some certain application can be very difficult. So understanding the concept of what you might be trying to do there, and then experimenting with it so you can see what the effect is, so that you can understand, the concept of what you're trying to possibly be doing, and how that now that you have this new track that is your mix, just like you had a new track when you did, first phase processing, that you may want to do some of that work on it also to enhance certain areas, to make certain areas come up in the mix, to make certain areas, expand up and ride above the mix a little bit, a little bit more. And it does it in a little bit different way. And it also, as you do that, it's strange, but it can also have kind of a blending effect of separating things. So when it starts trying to do expansion of the dynamics in this kind of a way, that you're basically that what's happening while you're expanding those dynamics, that it's expanding them in a different way than turning up, the doing automation and raising and lowering your levels. By doing this type of work, it has a little bit different effect. So you really need to experiment with it to see what type of effect that it's having on your mix and whether it's helpful or detrimental. And it's hard to say without you really understanding it. Somebody that I know that's really been, mixing for a long time or is a really good audio engineer, I can talk about this with him and go, certain situations we can talk about. But, trying to teach you that it is a tool that can help and areas that can help. You're basically dealing with your upper end and your lower end in the decibel range that you can do some expansion and some compression in those areas in different ways to try to make your mix come out sounding the way you want, and that these tools are available to help you mix from a different perspective. Does that make sense? You got a whole new perspective here that can help you evaluate things differently and go, wow, I can do that to it. And in this section, that could really use that. Now that I'm listening to it, now that I've thought about that, that's possible to do it. What do we know? How would that affect that differently? And then as you get better, that it's in your workflow and it becomes something you take into consideration and think about that, oh, wow, I can do that. That could help that. Or I'm hearing some issue that I can address with these tools now. And, just like I did on a single track when I went through first phase processing to address that issue. And it's another way to address something that may be happening in your mix to enhance or fix issues you may be having. And it's pretty much that simple. I'm not getting into a big example of what's happening there. You just understanding the concept of what's happening there, and that you understand that it's a tool available, and for you as it being a part of your workflow to evaluate your mix that basically now is being seen as a new track that you're working with before you send it into mastering, that this type of work can be helpful and help you fix issues or help you enhance the mix in different ways to try to accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish to make your mix come out sounding the way you want it. So I hope that made that real clear. I hope I kept that real simple and real untechnical to where it's something you can apply easily and evaluate and think about as something you can do and experiment with. So this pretty short video on expansion bus on your group processing, and in the next video we'll get into compression and maximization of our production before we limit it and be done with our mix. Peace, self, love. I hope you enjoyed this video on expansion and upwards compression, and I'll see you in the next video.